Hello and welcome to another video blog from home, and today on A Vogel Talks Menopause I'm going to be talking about 3 ways caffeine can make your menopause symptoms worse. If you like my tips and advice, then please subscribe and remember to hit the bell icon so you can be notified of all my new videos. We know that caffeine is probably one of the most common triggers for a whole range of menopause symptoms. Some of them can be quite surprising, so I thought I would go into a little bit more detail today about how caffeine can cause or trigger or interfere with your menopause symptoms. So first of all, how does caffeine do this? It revs up your nervous system. Unfortunately, with everything that's going on at the moment, we're already in a heightened state of anxiety, and all the physical changes that are going on in our body can put added pressure onto our nervous system, and very often that gets stuck in flight or fight mode. If you then add anything else in that's going to rev it up even further, that can very quickly turn to anxiety. It can trigger palpitations, it can trigger sweats and flushes. And for those of you who need a cup of coffee or a cup of tea the minute you get out of bed, that's going to rev up your nervous system, but it's also going to rev up your system for possibly at least a good 7 or 8 hours. So those morning symptoms that you get, maybe your morning flushes, your morning palpitations, could be a direct result of that first cup of tea or coffee. So it's really important here to go for water the minute you get up and have your tea or your coffee after you have had something to eat, and that can make quite a lot of difference. Second reason is that caffeine can interfere with your absorption of a whole range of vitamins and minerals such as calcium and magnesium, your B-vits and your iron. And remember, in the menopause, you need extra calcium to keep your bones strong, you need magnesium to support your nervous system and just about everything else. You need B vitamins for brain function, for energy, and for your nervous system. And iron is really important to stop you getting fatigue. So if you drink a lot of tea or coffee, you could actually be putting your body's availability of all these vitamins and minerals at risk just when you need more of them. Number 3, we tend to drink caffeine as a hot drink. We drink it in tea, coffee, things like hot chocolate as well. And for some women, having a hot drink can lead to a hot flush or a sweat too. So, just be careful with these ones here. The other things that can happen is that caffeine can interfere with your sleep. And I had one lady, and all she did was cut out her after dinner cup of coffee, and that made a huge difference. It practically stopped her night sweats. So if you think about it, if you have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, it's going to take your liver about 7 or 8 hours to process that cup of tea or coffee, which means that the caffeine at any point during that time could still have an impact on your nervous system. So as I mentioned before, if you have that first drink as a caffeine drink, 8 hours down the line, it could still be triggering your menopause symptoms. If you have a cup of coffee mid-afternoon onwards, then that cup of tea or coffee could be interfering with your sleep too. So it's about juggling and making sure you take the drinks at the right time to help you. The other thing that can happen is that caffeine can trigger palpitations on their own. It can affect muscle function, it can cause headaches, it can cause dizziness. And remember that caffeine, and especially drinks like tea and coffee, can dehydrate you, and we know that dehydration can also have a huge impact on menopause symptoms as well. So what can you do just to control your caffeine? Really important thing here is, if you drink a lot of coffee, is to decrease it slowly, and the same with tea. If you stop it really quickly, then you can end up with withdrawal symptoms. And my little sound bite, which is going to be included here, I'll give you a bit more information on how to decrease your caffeine in a nice orderly fashion. Number 2 is try and have your coffee in the morning at some point. For me, I love a cup of coffee, and I'm not going to say to anybody, don't ever have coffee again, because we need all the pleasure we can get in the menopause. But what I've learned over the years is that if I have a cup of coffee maybe 2 to 3 hours after I've had my breakfast, my body and my nervous system can tolerate it quite well. I couldn't cope with a cup of tea or coffee first thing, and certainly if I drink too much caffeine in the afternoon, then that very often gives me palpitations. So I find that maybe 10 o'clock in the morning, I'm ready for one really nice cup of coffee. Have a diary so that you can figure out if it is your tea or coffee that is having an impact on your symptoms. And this can be a really handy thing to do, remembering that especially coffee, not so much tea, but especially coffee, can be impacting on your symptoms up to 8 hours after you've taken that cup of coffee. You can try coffee substitutes. We do a lovely caffeine-free drink called Bamboo. If you're more of a tea Jenny, then you could look at things like Rooibos. Rooibos is a herb tea, but it tastes more like real tea rather than the herb teas that you normally get. And that's one of my favourite. Rooibos you can get in different flavours. I love the Earl Grey one. You can find them with chai, and you can find it flavoured with things such as vanilla. And mentioned before, remember the water. Keep drinking water. So if you do drink quite a bit of tea or coffee, then remember to intersperse that with good drinks of water, just to stop the dehydration. If you drink too much tea or coffee, these are also seen as diuretics, which means you'll be running to the toilet a lot more. And again, that nighttime drink of tea or coffee could be what's triggering your bladder in the middle of the night. So if you avoid caffeine drinks after, say, 6 o'clock at night, you might find that you get a much better night's sleep after that. Just remember too that caffeine is not just in drinks such as tea or coffee. It can be in energy drinks, and some of these energy drinks are extremely high in caffeine, because that's basically what they do. They rev up your nervous system, so you feel that you're bursting with energy, but you'll get a really big slump afterwards. Chocolate, especially dark chocolate, can be reasonably high in caffeine, so watch how much chocolate you're taking on a daily basis. And it can also be in some pain medication. So if you need to take painkillers of any kind, then just check the label, because you may find taking one of those in order to stop your headache will give you a caffeine rush, which might then give you another headache. So just read the label on these things. I hope you found this helpful. If any of you out there have any tips on how you have managed to curb your caffeine cravings, then please let us know. And until then, I'll see you next week for another A Vogel Talks Menopause.